Shabbat Shalom, Chanukah Sameach. I come to you on the day of my installation at Sinai Temple. A place which has welcomed me, my husband Noam, and our son Shemaiah in ways I could not have imagined. And furthermore, I come on the precipice of giving birth to my second child, whom I know will be made to feel at home here just as beautifully as I have been. And as I'm so close to bringing my second child into the world, and Shemaiah becomes an older sibling, it's not surprising that I come to this Torah portion contemplating sibling relationships and looking back at my own childhood with 3 younger brothers with whom I'm now incredibly close, and reading this week's Torah portion with the pregnant question of asking how to create healthy sibling relationships. However, our Torah portion of Vayeshev, which focuses on sibling rivalry, could be read more as a cautionary tale on sibling conflict. We have an opportunity to learn from the problematics of the story and to use our text really as an antithesis, ultimately leading us as parents and really just as human beings to help ease tensions that arise amongst our children and any relationships of tension that are around us. In whatever relationship, there tends to be some moments of conflict. And perhaps, especially when it comes to tensions amongst our children, we might ask, how do I help this situation? What is the best way to de-escalate the tension? And am I playing favorites? Yet, when reading the story of Joseph and his sibling, their father Jacob does not seem to be asking or acting upon any of these types of questions. Already in the second line of our Torah portion, we see a complicated family dynamic unfold. In verse 2 of chapter 37, the Torah tells us that Joseph would tend to the flock with his brothers, and then he would bring bad reports of his brothers to his father Jacob, meaning Joseph would come home and speak ill of his brothers. And when I read how Joseph informed on his brothers, I can't help but think about, if I were in Jacob's place, how would I respond to my son Joseph? As readers of the Torah's texts, in the words of philologist Eric Auerbach, while the Torah shows certain parts in high relief, others are left obscure. Suggestive influence of the unexpressed, there's a background quality, and a multiplicity of meanings and the need for interpretation. Which is to say that because the Torah gives little details and is minimalist in describing our characters, we have the opportunity to put ourselves into the text, to insert ourselves in the drama and imagine how we might want a character like Jacob to respond to his son Joseph. One of the most difficult aspects about relationships of any sort is figuring out how to have difficult conversations, and in particular, how to rebuke or caringly criticize another person. Our tradition calls the art of rebuke tochacha. In Maimonides' teaching about tochacha, he begins by saying that a person should not remain silent, and that it is best to rebuke by starting with a question. If we follow Maimonides' teaching regarding the art of rebuke, when reading the scene of Joseph speaking badly about his brothers to his father Jacob, we might wonder, how could Jacob have responded to Joseph? How could Jacob have rebuked Joseph? When I think about how Jacob, the parent in this scene, could have said something to Joseph, as Joseph is speaking ill about his brothers, I have my two parents in mind, as I'm brought back to childhood moments when my siblings and I were constantly fighting with one another. And I'm thinking about how each of my parents would respond in the Joseph story. In one ear, I hear my mother, my Ima, a trained social worker and energy healer, who, like Maimonides, might have urged Jacob to start the rebuke with a question and ask his son something like, what inside you is hurting that's making you want to say mean things about your siblings? Or how do you think it makes your brothers feel when you tattle on them? Why is it you wanted to share this? These are all questions that would allow Joseph to get a better sense of the heart of the matter, and it would allow Joseph and his brothers to give their father Jacob a fuller emotional backdrop and context for the scene. Now, in my other ear, I hear my father, my Abba, a rabbi, who also follow Maimonides' advice not to remain silent, and who might quote Rabbi Israel Salanter, the founder of the Musar movement, the 19th century movement of Jewish virtues and ethics, who said, someone who wants to be greater than others should not dig a pit for his fellow, but should build a hill for himself. If Jacob could quote Salanter, he would urge Joseph to reflect upon why he felt the need to bitterly share about his brothers. If Joseph was feeling low, then there are better ways, more virtuous ways of raising yourself up without putting others down. Not to mention, I would say, the irony of bringing up a pit in regards to the Joseph story. And while I might have hoped for Jacob to go in either of these directions when responding to Joseph, bringing bad reports about his brothers, the text follows Joseph's bad reports with, now Israel, Jacob, loved Joseph best of all his sons, and he made him an ornamented tunic, a technicolor dream coat. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of the brothers, they hated him, so they could not speak a friendly word. With no intervention or rebuke, the tensions between the children continue to escalate. When Joseph shares his dreams with his brothers and father, dreams of the brothers and his parents bowing down to him, the text tells us the brothers hated him even more, and then even more, and that his brothers were jealous of him. Yet, after all the hatred and jealousy felt by his brothers, the Torah tells us that their father Jacob simply kept the matter in mind. If we use Maimonides' teachings on Tochacha as a guide, then we can conclude that Jacob certainly did not succeed in following Jewish law around the art of rebuke. By keeping silent and holding the matter in, Jacob allowed for the hatred between Joseph and his brothers to fester. And moreover, the verse in the Torah from which Maimonides and the rabbis of our tradition use to extrapolate the laws of Tochacha, of rebuke, is a verse that would be particularly relevant for Joseph and his siblings. Leviticus 19:17 states, "Do not hate your brother in your heart. Surely you shall rebuke him." It's from this verse that we learn the laws of Tochacha, the Jewish laws around careful, delicate, but necessary need for rebuke. If only we could have shared with Jacob. First, it's not good to hold hatred in our hearts, nor to keep things in and hold on. 2, do not stay silent. We have an obligation to rebuke. And 3, rebuke in a way that can be heard, such as starting with a question. As I begin my journey in the rabbinate, I know that navigating complex and delicate situations is a natural and necessary part of this work. And therefore, I strive to remember the obligation to not stay silent, not to hold things in, to share my moments of challenge, to communicate as best I can, and to face others in a way that can be heard, openly, curiously, and in a manner that allows for us to be in deep relationship with one another. Shabbat Shalom.